Muito bem-vindos ao Mandela Bridges World e-Summit, hoje, dia 18 de julho, Dia Internacional Nelson Mandela. Esta é uma...
Bienvenue à ce sommet.
Com todas as organizações que integram a Ubuntu Global Network. Estão inscritos nesta conferência mais de 1.200 pessoas de 53 países diferentes. O programa integra 31 oradores de 19 países: Portugal, Espanha, Reino Unido, Singapura, Moçambique, África do Sul, Timor-Leste, Índia, Bangladesh, Estados Unidos, Jordânia, Eslovénia, Irlanda, Nova Zelândia, Malawi, Egito, Bósnia, Finlândia e Maurícias. Pela diversidade de línguas e de forma a garantir que todos podem tomar parte deste momento, disponibilizamos a possibilidade de tradução e interpretação permanente desta sessão em português, em espanhol, em inglês e em francês. Para recorrer a este apoio de tradução simultânea, devem selecionar no menu inferior da vossa janela de Zoom a opção Interpretação e escolher o idioma pretendido. Poderão ainda ajustar o volume do orador segundo a vossa preferência. Este e-Summit, dedicado a Nelson Mandela, conta com 2 co-anfitriões essenciais, muitíssimo importantes, que ajudaram a construir toda esta conferência. José Ramos Horta e John Volmink. José Ramos Horta é um incansável embaixador da causa timorense desde 1975. Foi laureado com o Prémio Nobel da Paz em 96 pela defesa dos direitos humanos e autodeterminação do povo de Timor-Leste. Entre 2001 e 2012 ocupou várias funções no Estado timorense, foi presidente, primeiro-ministro, ministro dos Negócios Estrangeiros. Atualmente é presidente do Movimento para a Democracia Mundial. Vamos até Timor-Leste, do outro lado do mundo, com 8 fusos horários de diferença, até José Ramos Horta. Seja muito bem-vindo a este encontro Mandela Bridges World e-Summit. É um gosto contar com a sua presença.
Muito bom dia, good morning, buenos dias, bonjour a todos vocês que estão espalhados pelos 4 cantos do mundo e participam neste Zoom internacional de homenagem a Nelson Mandela.
Creio que estaremos com alguns desafios nesta ligação. Vamos só procurar voltar a ela.
Estão a ouvir? Estão a ouvir?
José Ramos Horta, estamos já em condições de ouvir. Vamos ouvi-lo, seja muito bem-vindo a este encontro.
É com grande alegria que dou as boas-vindas a todos os participantes, bem como a todos os oradores, a este Mandela Bridges World Summit. Iremos juntos partilhar esta homenagem ao legado de Nelson Mandela. Com efeito, reunir cerca de 1000 participantes de 50 países, bem como 31 oradores de 19 países, para afirmar que é possível construir pontes e derrubar muros que nos separam. É uma razão de esperança que devemos celebrar. Quero começar por enviar uma saudação muito especial ao professor John Volmink, presidente da Ubuntu Global Network, que comigo partilhará a presidência deste congresso. O seu exemplo e a sua vida servem-nos de inspiração para acreditar que um mundo melhor é possível e evidência como o legado de Mandela está tão presente em tantos sul-africanos que continuam a ser construtores de pontes. Bem-haja, professor Volmink. Quero também saudar todos os oradores que aceitaram o convite que eu e o professor Volmink lhes dirigimos. Reúnem-se aqui pessoas extraordinárias, como os Prémios Nobel da Paz Muhammad Yunus e Kailash Satyarthi, ou antigos chefes de Estado, como Tarja Halonen ou Danilo Turk, antigos primeiros-ministros como Helen Clark ou Bertie Ahern, ativistas sociais como a Kerry Kennedy ou Tandy Shahane, ou ainda jornalistas como John Carlin ou cientistas como Diana Prata. O melhor da humanidade reuniu-se para prestar homenagem a esse grande líder que foi Nelson Mandela. A todos os que irão intervir neste evento, a nossa profunda gratidão. Celebramos hoje mais um Dia Internacional de Nelson Mandela, embora as Nações Unidas decidiram tornar presente em cada 18 de julho a herança de Mandela, o seu exemplo de serviço ao bem comum, dando a sua vida para transformar uma situação de injustiça inaceitável e desumana, como era o regime do apartheid, num país democrático que respeita a igual dignidade de todas as pessoas, deve ser relembrado. Soube fazê-lo sonhando um país arco-íris, onde todos tivessem lugar e sem deixar ninguém para trás. Escolheu ser resiliente face a todas as adversidades e não se deixar abater por 27 anos de prisão. Acreditou sempre que um dia a longa noite da opressão terminaria e a sua esperança venceu. Os desafios de construção de um mundo melhor, porém, não terminaram. A luta pela igualdade e pela equidade, sem qualquer discriminação, em função da cor da pele, da religião, da orientação sexual ou da opção política, não terminou. Pelo contrário, multiplicam os desafios em muitos dos nossos países. A estes desafios somou-se, nos últimos meses, um outro provocado pelas consequências da pandemia do Covid-19. Se Mandela ainda fosse vivo, estaria seguramente na primeira linha dos que defendem que devemos ser solidários nesta crise, não deixando que os mais pobres e mais vulneráveis sejam devastados pelas consequências sanitárias, sociais e econômicas. Por tudo isto, é tão importante tornar atual a herança de Mandela. Mas nesta celebração recordamos não só o passado, mas, sobretudo, mobilizamos-nos para o futuro. Nesse sentido, a última palavra que quero aqui deixar na abertura deste Mandela Bridges World Summit é para os jovens líderes Ubuntu. Sobre os vossos ombros pesa uma grande responsabilidade. Em certa medida, o legado de Mandela está à vossa guarda. Compete-vos olhar para os desafios do nosso mundo e saber dizer presente. Esperamos muito de vós, como os novos líderes na promoção dos direitos humanos, da justiça social e da democracia. O mundo espera uma nova geração que seja protagonista da esperança, inspirada por tudo o que Mandela nos ensinou. Contamos convosco.
Muito obrigado. É uma honra contar consigo na abertura desta conferência internacional, poder ter o prestígio, a voz, o conhecimento e a obra de José Ramos Horta na abertura desta conferência internacional Pontes Mandela é de enorme significado. Um abraço grande até Timor-Leste. Vamos contar consigo ao longo desta conferência. Bem-aja por estar connosco. O outro co-presidente deste evento é John Volmink, que nos tem acompanhado nos últimos 10 anos na consolidação e internacionalização do projeto da Academia Ubuntu. John Volmink é o presidente da Ubuntu Global Network, iniciou a sua carreira académica na Universidade de Western Cape Town e concluiu o seu doutoramento em Educação Matemática na Cornell University, nos Estados Unidos. É o presidente do MIET África e continua a liderar conselhos de várias organizações não governamentais para o desenvolvimento de áreas como a educação, a saúde e o desenvolvimento. John, hello. It is a great joy that we once again share in an international meeting to talk about peace and building bridges. Today we celebrate Mandela, who is just an important reference at Ubuntu Leaders Academy. Welcome, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Rui. It's a great pleasure working with you. I also want to say it's a great honor for me to co-chair this day with the great President Horta. I must acknowledge that I'm a great fan of him, and so is some of my children. Your legacy is an amazing one. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to all for joining us today as we reflect and draw strength from the legacy of Nelson Mandela. This occasion is made all the more important by the great uncertainties that we face at this present moment in history. I was in my early years of high school when Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment on Robben Island following the Rivonia trial in 1964. And with so many others, my quest to understand the significance of this unjust act was severely stifled by the veil of secrecy drawn by the draconian apartheid government of the time. And the only misinformation that they allowed to leak out was the false narrative that Nelson Mandela and those who were sentenced with him were all radicals bent on destroying the country. And this culture of silence was cruelly enforced through an obedience ethic that made it very difficult to question or to grasp the significance of the role that Madiba played. It is the case that nothing that Madiba said or wrote while was allowed to be quoted during his time in prison. In fact, it was only in February 1985 at a rally in Soweto arranged by the United Democratic Front to celebrate the occasion of Archbishop Tutu's receipt of the Nobel Peace Prize that we heard the late Zinzi Mandela, who sadly passed away this week. We heard her read a powerful message from her father, rejecting the offer of the then President P.W. Botha to release him if he would accept a range of unjust conditions. Fortunately for me, while I was at high school, I had teachers who surreptitiously passed on information to some of us about what was truly happening. They helped me to gain a deeper understanding of what the struggle was all about and the important role that Nelson Mandela was playing in making the distant dream of a democracy a reality. Needless to say, Some of these teachers were arrested on more than one occasion, and we were left without teachers. They were detained without trial under the 90-day detention or 180-day detention laws, no trial. But their courage to stand by the truth at great cost to themselves was a gift to me and my generation. It was only in 1990 when Nelson Mandela walked out of prison on his own terms did I complete my understanding, my own understanding of who this incredible man really was. He stepped out of prison into a deeply divided society filled with conflict and hate and injustice, and he immediately began to lay the foundation of a bridge of healing from a broken past to a new dynamic future. Nelson Mandela later said, "As I walked out of the door towards the gate of the prison that would lead me to my freedom, I knew that if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I would still be in prison." So it is no surprise that against expectations and despite all the hardship and the pain and adversity he and his family experienced during his years in prison, Nelson Mandela convinced us that we cannot overcome hate through hate, but by empathy. And he believed, and I quote, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposites." Nelson Mandela swept away the conventional signposts, which were leading us only to greater injustice and pain, and gave us new hope of a future country that belongs to all its people. We have a long way to go in this country to reach that future, but in the spirit of Ubuntu, Nelson Mandela said, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." Nelson Mandela gave the whole world hope in a dream that seemed so unattainable, namely that we can overcome our prejudices and hate and embrace the power found in one community, one country, and indeed in one global human family. That is a vision we need to grasp now, more than ever, as we face the chronic challenges borne by the deep injustices, such as poverty and hunger, as well as the acute threat, a global pandemic that calls us to urgent and united action. So, as I close, today, we are joined by more than 1,200 people who have been drawn together because we share a common dream. And we realize that we can only empower our dream by working in partnership with each other. We are privileged and honored to have with us today some of the most distinguished minds and brilliant minds and exemplary leaders in the world. And I really am honored to be here at this occasion when they are joining us. So on behalf of the Ubuntu Global Network, I would like to welcome you and thank you for walking the long road to freedom with us. Thank you.
My father says, I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you, the people, are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. I will return. Amanda!
A letter that he wrote to me that I obviously didn't get, where he was analyzing my poetry and so on. It was very touching, it was quite emotional.
It is like some kind of personal comfort that at least the world recognizes the sacrifices that he's made, that he wasn't able to father us for many years, that when he was incarcerated, he suffered many losses whilst in prison, personal losses, but he still came out to be a man of peace and reconciliation. I'm glad that that is being documented and shared and that people continue to celebrate his life. I think it's very important for us to try to help implement his vision for South Africa, for South African children, for the youth in general, for the world, for everybody to realize, now I think that the saying is it's in your hands. That's what the legacy institutions are saying. That's what he has said, I'm handing over. I think it's so important, for us just to, let go, let him be. I would do it all again. I can't imagine, that's all I've known. Everything else is just a fantasy. And what I've learned from this is to define myself not according to what I've suffered, the anguish and so on, but according to how I've survived that. And I think it's an important lesson, especially as in my capacity as a mother, as a grandmother. It's very important for me to be able to demonstrate that type of resilience and ability to see, to have a more holistic approach to life for the sake of my children, especially during difficult times.
I would like to express our condolences to the Mandela family. Having lost Zinzi, the Mandela daughter, on Monday. This was on the same day that in 1969, Mandela lost his son, Thembekile, in a car accident. And his anguish of not being allowed to attend the funeral, he was not allowed to come out of prison. Today, we will hear from the grandson, Ndaba Thembekile Mandela. He was born in 1982, and today he's an author and a mentor, a spokesperson, an entrepreneur, a political consultant, and the grandson of Nelson. He was born in Soweto in South Africa. Ndaba currently is the co-founder and chairperson of the Mandela Institute for Humanity. He's actively keeping the legacy of his grandfather alive and introducing Nelson Mandela to the younger generation. And he has many other roles. I want to say that he, for good reasons, couldn't join us live today because of the grief in the family. But he did send us a video message, which we will now see.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and my favorites, the youth all around the world who are tuning in today. It is an honor for me to come and greet you on this special day known as Nelson Mandela International Day, 18 July, a day in which one of the greatest leaders of this world was born. And so we celebrate this day by remembering why he was that special leader, because he was the man that dedicated 67 years of his life to public service. So in turn, on this day, we dedicate 67 minutes of our day to doing community service, doing something for those who are less fortunate than ourselves. Maybe it's an orphanage, maybe it's an old age home, maybe it's a school that doesn't have the resources they need. Ladies and gentlemen, we can all do our part. Here in 2020, we ask ourselves, how is Nelson Mandela's leadership relevant? We say it is relevant because Nelson Mandela taught us that each of us needs to be a leader in today's world. We can no longer wait for other people to lead the way. COVID-19 has shown the cracks of the system. The presidents don't have the answers. The ministers, the professors, they don't have the answers, ladies and gentlemen. I believe each and every single one of us that was born here on earth today was born for a special reason, for a purpose. And it is up to us to find that as we grow, as we experience, as we communicate, as we grow our networks, ladies and gentlemen. Let us not let COVID take away our humanity. Our humanity always comes first, especially during these trying times, ladies and gentlemen. I thank all the organizers of this beautiful conference. I wish that we can create more networks and grow together. Again, Patrulleros, I want to say thank you for this great partnership, and I know that we're going to build beyond and beyond as we grow together. And I look forward to coming back to Portugal in 2021. Hopefully, humanity is back intact after the COVID. I hope to see each and every single one of you that are tuned in today after COVID. On this day of Mandela Day, we say we love you. Auntie Zinzi was my auntie, my mother. There's no woman who had more love than that. And so what I wish for the world is more love, because that's what Auntie Zinzi showed me, was more love, and that's what Tamatipa is about.
Uma poderosa mensagem de Nelson Mandela na sessão de abertura desta nossa Conferência Internacional Pontes Mandela, em que também prestamos tributo à memória de Zinzi Mandela, que faleceu esta semana, vítima também desta pandemia de Covid-19. Com John Volmink e com José Ramos Horta, os nossos dois co-presidentes, iremos continuar este programa ao longo das próximas horas, ligando todo o mundo em torno do legado de Mandela. Vamos para o primeiro painel. E Nelson Mandela, avançamos para um momento que também é muito, muito especial. É com grande gosto que abrimos este painel, o legado de Mandela e os desafios contemporâneos. Mandela continua a ser, no nosso mundo, uma referência inegável de liderança pela paz e pela reconciliação. No passado dia 16 de maio, celebramos no âmbito da Academia de Líderes Ubuntu o Congresso Mundial no Dia Internacional Viver Juntos em Paz. Na altura tivemos as palavras de incentivo de António Guterres, secretário-geral das Nações Unidas, e hoje também, em que celebramos o Dia Internacional Nelson Mandela, o secretário-geral da ONU homenageia o defensor global extraordinário da igualdade, da dignidade e da solidariedade. Este ano, no Dia Mandela, Guterres incentiva-nos a ser parte da campanha tome uma ação, inspire a mudança para que possamos lutar por um mundo com mais dignidade e mais justiça social. Ouçamos a sua mensagem.
Each year, on Nelson Mandela's birthday, we pay tribute to an extraordinary global advocate for equality, dignity, and solidarity. Madiba was a moral giant of the 20th century, whose timeless legacy continues to guide us today. The theme of Nelson Mandela's International Day is Take Action, Inspire Change. It highlights the importance of working together, from governments to citizens, to build a peaceful, sustainable, and equitable world. We mark this day at a time when the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic endangers everyone, everywhere, and especially the most vulnerable. In the face of these challenges, world leaders need to recognize the vital importance of unity and solidarity. COVID-19 is exposing deep inequalities. We need to fight this pandemic of inequality through a new social contract for a new era. Only together can we fend off the common threat of COVID and recover better. As United Nations marks its 75th anniversary in this fragile time, we reflect on the life and work of Nelson Mandela, who embodied the highest values of the United Nations and took action and inspired change. Despite many years as a prisoner of conscience, Madiba retained his dignity and commitment to his ideals. Let his example propel any government that keeps such prisoners to release them. There should be no prisoners of conscience in the 21st century. Nelson Mandela reminds us that as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality persist in our world, none of us can truly rest. On this Mandela Day, let us recall that we can and must be part of the quest for a better future of dignity, opportunity, and prosperity for all people on a healthy planet.
O primeiro painel desta tarde é dedicado ao legado de Mandela e aos grandes desafios contemporâneos. Integra 3 ilustres convidados, 3 laureados com o Prémio Nobel da Paz, o que é para nós uma honra enorme. José Ramos Horta foi Prémio Nobel da Paz em 96 pelo seu trabalho no sentido de uma solução justa e pacífica para o conflito em Timor-Leste. Muhammad Yunus foi laureado com o Prémio Nobel da Paz em 2006 pelos seus esforços para criar desenvolvimento económico e social, é o fundador do microcrédito. E Kailash Satyarthi foi igualmente laureado com o Prémio Nobel da Paz em 2014 pela luta pelo direito de todas as crianças e jovens à educação. É um enorme privilégio começar este painel com José Ramos Horta, Prémio Nobel da Paz. José.
Good evening from Timor-Leste. We have come together to celebrate Mandela at a time of great turbulence in the world. The organizers of the summit, acknowledging the volatility experienced in so many corners of our world, have drafted a declaration to be adopted later today, titled One Human Family. I have read the bloggers who say that the silver lining in COVID-19 is that we are realizing that we are, after all, one family. Sure, we are a human family, and some are the rich relations. As Pope Francis has stated, we are not all on the same boat. According to the World Food Programme, 135 million people in our world face crisis levels of hunger. Now, as economies are collapsing due to this global COVID-19, exacerbated by regional conflicts, fueled by Western and Russian arms producers, an additional 130 million people are on the verge of starvation, leading us into what the executive director of World Food Program has called famines of biblical proportion. We have an opportunity to come out of this disaster of unprecedented magnitude with new priorities and a plan of action to rebuild our countries and societies. Will there be a second opportunity? If this one is missed, we will all too easily move on, forget this catastrophe, as we have forgotten past catastrophes, and return to indulging ourselves in the extremes of decadent wealth and gut-wrenching poverty. The wars in Syria and Yemen will continue, with Western powers, the PUS, Canada included, Russia and other smaller weapons-producing countries continuing to profit from the killing of women and children. The poor, the destitute, will continue to die from cholera, malaria, dengue, hunger. In one form or another, their misery will land on our doorsteps, on your doorsteps. If there is an overriding lesson from COVID-19, it is that with families and nations alike, the health of the unit is only as strong as its weakest link. There is an approach that has worked in the past and could work again. In 1948, after the end of World War II, the United States enacted the Marshall Plan, sustained by 5% of the US GDP, to finance the rebuilding of Europe. When one looks at the Europe that emerged after World War II and the vibrant markets for US goods that were created in the process, it was clearly a resounding success. If we are truly one family, I issue a challenge to the wealthier cousins to nourish the health of the entire family, lift the survival potential of all with a modern-day Marshall Plan, not for one single region, but for all regions of the world. This would require the combined leadership of the G7 and the G20 countries. In addition, I propose that we solicit the active engagement of 1,000 biggest banks in the world, 1,000 biggest companies, 1,000 richest men and women, 1,000 richest foundations, 1,000 universities, 1,000 richest churches to invest in the green and blue economy, sustainable agriculture, clean water, education and health, modern clinics and hospitals, science and medical research institutes, create meaningful jobs in every country in the world. But as immediate measure, I call upon the US to lift all sanctions on Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea, so that these countries can kickstart their economies that's been severely damaged by COVID-19, the global economic meltdown, and by sanctions. Today, I read in the news, President Rouhani of Iran said that 25 million Iranians have contracted COVID-19, and approximately 35 million more are vulnerable. This is out of a population of 18 million. Can we, in the midst of this pandemic, argue about what brought about really the collapse of the Iranian economy, or what brought about the collapse of the Venezuelan economy or Cuban economy? Are we human beings, or aren't we? If we are, please lift free sanctions to all countries so that they have an opportunity to invest, to improve their economies and look after their people. I continue that the world financial institutions, creditor nations, commercial banks write off the entire debt of all fragile states, the G7 plus small countries, of which Timor-Leste, Liberia, Sierra Leone, the Congo, we are part of, and of the so-called highly indebted countries. Because relief from the debt burden, countries will invest, should invest more in infrastructure for education and health, employment creation, fostering of small business and agriculture, green energy and blue economy. For the weapons producing countries, please freeze all weapons exports to all developing countries for the next 10 years. Remember the slaughter of human beings that you weapon sales. You argue that you attach, some of you in the West, you attach strict human rights conditions to weapons exports. I would say, please spare me this, which you know is a lie. A worldwide mandatory end of torture and a 10-year moratorium on the death penalty. At least, ideally, it would be permanent, mandatory end of death penalty. But at least let's start with 10 years to enable debate, change in the legislations, in the constitution, etc. But a moratorium should start immediately. We are promising to start anew after this global pandemic, aren't we? This is the least we should do to show our humanity. Last but not least, move further on the Paris Agreement. Set a more ambitious 0.5 C temperature increase instead of the ridiculous 2 to 1.5 centigrade. Some will say, I have heard it before, I am naive, that I am proposing the undoable. Nelson Mandela, whose life and legacy we will celebrate here today, has shown us the power of conviction and resilience. It all seems impossible until this is done. I thank you.
Thank you so much, José. We fully support your appeal. It's very important to take care of all these topics. And now I invite you, José, to introduce another guest, Mr. Mohamed Yunus. José, could you introduce Mr. Yunus?
Mohamed Yunus needs no introduction. An old friend, he visited me in Timor-Leste twice. First time before he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He is the creator of the Grameen Bank, microcredit, professor of economics. His face, his name is known throughout the world for his extraordinary vision and action to eliminate poverty. Dear friends around the world, I pleased to bring to you Mohamed Yunus. Please, Mohamed.
Thank you, Jose. It's a wonderful friend. Thank you for your introduction. Good evening from Bangladesh. I'm here in Bangladesh, just like Jose was in his country. This is a very important occasion. This reminds me my days that I had spent with Madiba, particularly remembering his 91st birthday. I was the speaker, birthday speaker for him in Johannesburg, in his presence. This is 2009. And today is the 102nd birthday. He's not present with us. But his legacy is something inspires us all around. But today it becomes more important than ever in the context of the corona catastrophe. Particularly one aspect which comes again and again, the leadership, the moral leadership he's provided to his nation and also to the whole world. And he's one of the leaders who led the people, not people. He was not riding on the popularity of the people enjoyed by him, but he took very unpopular decision, very bold decision, to make, knowing fully that this is unpleasant decision. This is not going to be supported by vast majority of the people behind him. But he took it because he thought it was the right decision to take. And this is outrageously bold decision. Today we need that leadership to take outrageous bold decision. That's the time that we have right now, that we have to make sure that we have discovered our leadership in us. In the context of, again, corona crisis, corona catastrophe, lots of things have happened. But I see this is a great opportunity also. Corona has created a great opportunity to do things differently. Corona crisis has put us in the crossroad. Now, we never had an alternative option or alternative road to follow. Today, corona crisis has provided us that option, bringing us to the crossroad. There's a tremendous amount of initiatives going around the world, supported by enormous amount of money, some countries providing billions of dollars, some trillions of dollars, to go back as fast as possible, to go back to the world that we are coming from before the coronavirus took us away from there. Coronavirus has stopped the whole economy, stopped the whole world. And that was a very lucky situation for us that the coronavirus has done that. And now there's enormous efforts to go back. I said, that's a very wrong decision to go back. Why should we go back? That world was a very unhospitable world for us. Actually, that world put us on a death row. All the population in the world was in the death row. We are riding in a train to go to the ultimate destination of death by a massive number of people because of the global warming. And we are told again and again how the global warming is coming to get us extinct on this planet. And our young generation, our teenagers were marching on the street, telling us their parents, their grandparents were totally irresponsible generations. They destroyed the whole planet. There's no future for this generation. And if our children are raising this issue that they don't have a future for them, this world is not livable for them. And what happens to the grandchildren? What happens to the next generation? You never cared for that. So they were addressing us, our parent generation and grandparent generation, that whatever responsibility that you have shown, now it's time to turn around and make this world livable for us. That's what they feel they were making. And repeatedly they're saying, listen to the scientists because they're giving you warning. They're already giving us the countdown. Countdown has begun and just not much time left. And now going back to that world, for what? To finish the countdown? That doesn't make sense. So this is not the direction that we'll be moving. We should not restart the train to go back to the direction that we are heading for in the ultimate destruction for all of us. So, and not only the global warming is something that made this world not worth going back to, that at the same time we had a massive wealth concentration. all the wealth of the world is amassing in a few hands, only a small number of people enjoying the 99% of the wealth of the entire world. And the remaining 99% of the population to have satisfied with 1% of the wealth for the whole world. So that's not a kind of a world that is sustainable. It's not a world that people can live with peace and harmony, because that world is going to be carried by anger and dissatisfaction, and it will explode by itself. And it's a ticking time bomb. So going back means going back to the ticking time bomb. Again, destruction waiting for us. And the third one is the massive unemployment that we see coming in our way through artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is coming systematically to remove people from the job. So they will have massive unemployment all over the world in a few years ahead of us. So what happens to the world when people don't have any work to do? And where do they get their food from? What do they survive on? So these are the terrifying possibilities that we are facing to go back to that world. So this coronavirus has created a situation. Now we can decide to go in a different direction, not to the direction that is a disaster-prone world that we see. We go to the world completely different. We can create a new world. We can go in a new direction because we know exactly what caused those global warming. It's not something unknown. Scientists have shown piece by piece where these sources of this global warming. So we create a world where these sources will not be carried with us into that new world. We stop them. We have a checkpost along the way so that we check them, who can go in, who cannot, what can go in, what cannot go in. So we'll make sure instead of fossil fuel, we get the green energy and so on. Instead of plastic, we have a better packaging materials than destroying the whole planet and so on. There are so many things that we can identify. And we see what caused those wealth concentration. Financial institutions caused those wealth concentration. So we redesigned the entire financial institutions. We have been talking about social business to solve problems rather than make money. This world is now run by profit maximization. So you single-mindedly pursue that path of profit maximization. You don't see what harm you're doing to the people, what harm you're doing to the planet. As long as you make an enormous amount of profit, you go right ahead, ignoring what destruction that you cause to the people and to the planet. So we have to now create another kind of business, a business to solve the problem rather than profit maximization. So we create those kind of businesses, which is based on zero personal profit. So we create business without any personal profit. We call it social business. So we introduce social business. We already carry on with social business. So we bring that social business and do the banking system entirely redesigned and have lots of banks with the social business and lots of healthcare system with the social business and so many other things. So there are already known ways how to create that new world. We can create a world with zero unemployment. We can create a world with zero net carbon emission. We can create a world with zero wealth concentration. So that's the direction we should be doing. This is the best time to do it. And that needs outrageously bold decision. That's the time for bold decision I'm talking about. The second point I want to make while we are talking about the corona crisis, I'm just issued an appeal supported by Jose and Kailash, who are here today, and many others around the world, to make corona vaccine as a global common good. Because today, as we see things are happening, big companies are coming up with the corona vaccine. Vaccine is the ultimate because within less than 100 days, coronavirus has conquered the whole world. It invaded it. In less than 100 days, it conquered the whole world. So the whole world is at the command of the coronavirus. How do we get back? How do we retake? How do we reclaim this planet from the coronavirus? Only way to do this is vaccine. And vaccines are being developed in many countries. And we are told some of them will bring out the vaccine at the end of the year or beginning of the next year or the middle of the next year. It's coming. We are assured that it's coming. But the fact is, as they come, we already see bad signs. Already one country, United States, is buying up all the vaccine that will be produced as soon as the production begins. Already they have paid them. They paid Novavax, the company which is coming out the vaccine in the United States, an American company, $1.6 billion to provide them 100 million vaccines for USA. And then they have already paid Sanofi in France another big sum to buy up all the initial production that they will have. So they are going company after company. All the American companies will be obliged to sell vaccines to the American people. So what happens to the rest of the world? And we see United Kingdom signed up an agreement with GlaxoSmithKline to deliver them 50 million doses of vaccine to the United Kingdom. Already they have made the deal. And others in Oxford and AstraZeneca, they are producing, and they make commitment to UK and European Union to have the vaccine for the European Union. What about the rest of the world? As long as vaccines are owned by companies, owned by commercial companies, there is no chance that the vast majority of the people will get to it. So only way we can assure it if we make this as already declare it beforehand, that it will be a common good. It will be a global common good, so that nobody should own that. Nobody will be owning the vaccine. This is nothing new. It had already happened. Polio vaccine was never owned by anybody. The person who developed it, he announced that it is a people's vaccine. And ever since, it remained an open source product. So anybody can produce it. Similarly, we can produce it, the corona vaccine. And once the ownership is gone, then every country who has the capacity, facility, can produce their own vaccines, so that nobody has to wait for after the rich countries are taken care of, then gradually in months or years later, it will come to the poorer countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, and so on and so forth. We don't have to wait. Everybody can produce it. So that should be made very, very clear right now. It again needs a very bold decision. So this is the time for taking this bold decision, so that we can save the humanity right here and save the planet for the and save us from the corona catastrophe that we are suffering from, and make sure we don't miss this chance. We don't miss this chance to create a new world for us. This opportunity will never happen again. It came without our designing for it, without for expecting it, but it's here in our hand. We should not miss a single moment in trying to change the direction of our world to go to a new world that we are dreaming about. This is the best opportunity that we got. Let's not miss it, and let's not make corona vaccine keep it away from the vast majority of people. We should announce it immediately as a global common good, so that everybody can have it. Poor, rich, doesn't matter. People who cannot afford it, they will get it free, so that nobody should be deprived from getting vaccine. At the same time, not only it should be available, it should be available at the same time. Like when they are having it in USA and Europe, this will also be available in Asia, Africa, Latin America, everywhere else. The timing is very important. Availability is important, but the timing of availability is extremely important, so that everybody can get it. So that's what I think the leadership part I'm emphasizing, reminding what Madiba has given us, that leadership. Let's have that leadership now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yunus. It's a great honor, and we, all of us, the participants in this conference, will be with you in this issue, make the vaccine to COVID-19 available for all around the world. José, could you introduce now Kailash Satyarthi, another our special guest?
Kailash is one of the great inspiring leaders of the world, devoted all his adult life from the moment he finished his university studies and married a great woman, his wife Sumedha. And after finish his university studies, instead of looking for a paid job somewhere, he told his wife, I want to work towards freeing the children from slavery. And Sumedha said, yes, I fully support you on that. So the two, Kailash and Sumedha, began this journey of many decades to free children in India and South Asia and around the world from slavery. He is one of the most inspiring persons I have met. Him and his wife and the whole family, his children, his in-laws, all dedicated. And he went through harassment, physical threats, attacks, while challenging slave owners who saw him as a threat to their unethical business. So it's a great honor, privilege to introduce to you, if introduction necessary, of a great man of 21st century, Kailash Satyarthi.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to be speaking alongside my two heroes and brothers, President Ramos Horta and Dada Muhammad Yunus. More importantly, I learned that I'm addressing several thousand young people, and that is my biggest honor because I'm addressing the real legacy of Madeva. I don't think that we can ever leave Madeva or Madeva can ever leave us. Though he is no more among us physically, but whenever any voice is raised against injustice anywhere in the world, Madeva is alive. Whenever there is any spark of love and compassion, Madeva is alive. When there is a cool breeze for peace, Madeva is alive. And if there is a candle of love is lit by anyone, anywhere in the world, Madeva is with us. Madeva is in this light of love. So dear friend, this is the legacy of Madeva, which most of you or many of you carries with you. And that's why you are the part of Ubuntu Young Forum. Dear friends, in the history, no change was possible without the vigor, the honesty, the morality, and the zeal, the commitment, the engagement, and active leadership of young people. And this is much more needed now. I recall when I was young and organizing a demonstration to release Nelson Mandela in India, I was arrested and beaten up by police along with some of my friends. And then there was a time when I can feel the goosebumps even now when I met him for the first time and talked about the issue of child labor and invited him to flag off the global march against child labor, which we started from 3 corners of the world in 1998. And one leg was started from Cape Town, the Cape of Good Hope, in front of the jail where Madeva has spent 17 or 18 years of his life. Unfortunately, he could not come, so Grasa came along with his message that was so inspiring. Then I had another chance, and I can still feel that energy and that love and the resolve to educate the world. And that was inviting him and asking him, requesting him for a message for global campaign for education. And he did it. So dear friends, today in this situation of pandemic, so many things are happening. The new normals would be created. People are facing tremendous problems, and in the future, so many other problems are going to arise. I am talking about the involvement and participation of young people. As my brother Horta has pointed out, that I have been freeing children from slavery and trying to educate and rehabilitate them in India and many more countries. So when this COVID-19 came and started spreading, some of the former child slaves who are being rehabilitated and educated in our Balashram center, they came to know that there is a serious problem of face masks in the rural areas and among the poor people. They cannot afford to buy. My children, who were former child slaves, started thinking that how can we stitch face masks to other young people and other people who are villagers. And I tell you that those who never stitched anything, they have stitched thousands, 17 to 18,000 of masks during all these months. So that was so inspirational. Many of them decided that in their villages, they are going to keep the spirit of people alive and training them about social distancing or washing hands and some simple things. But now I'm talking about some of the big initiatives that the young people have led in the past. Today, 150, to be more precise, 152 million children are working as child laborers. But 20 years ago or so, the number was about 250 million to 260 million, something like that. And then millions of youth got united under the big banner of Global March Against Child Labor. And the physical march went across 103 countries, which was participated by 15 million people, and most of them were youth and volunteers. And they were demanding for an international law against worst forms of child labor like slavery, trafficking, forced prostitution, forced beggary, etc. The boys and girls coming from that background raised strongest possible voice in front of the world leaders in Geneva, in the General Assembly of International Labour Organization, and called upon. And their slogan was simple, message was simple, that world is not so poor that cannot take away the books, take away the tools and guns from the tiny hands and replace them with the books and toys and pencils. A new international law has been unanimously adopted, and since then the number slowed down. But now, as the consequence of COVID-19, I'm afraid that all this great achievement of collective achievements of the governments and civil society and corporations and other groups, international organization, is in serious danger. As we know that 1.6 billion school-going children, school-age children, are not able to go to school due to long closures. We also know that 370 million children and their families, those who are poor and marginalized, were largely depending on school feeding programs or conditional cash transfers. I'm afraid that many of them may drop out from the schools that we have experienced in the past in Argentina, in long closures due to Ebola and so on. So we have to prioritize. And There is another campaign which has been going on, and it has been jointly launched by many of us, including Brother Ramos Horta, and I learned that my another friend, Prince Ali, and another friend and sister, Kerry Kennedy, are also present here somewhere in this event. So we have jointly invited young people, and it was their call. They wanted to make this world safe, free, and educated for every child. Every young person should be free, safe, and educated. So 100 million young people are suffering multiple violence. But on the other hand, hundreds of millions of youth are ready to take up challenges. They wanted a strong platform, some collective action with big dreams. They have all energy and enthusiasm. So young people, alongside the Nobel laureates and other moral leaders, decided to launch this campaign, 100 million for 100 million. 100 million young people are becoming the spokespersons, the change makers, champions for the life of those 100 million who are left out and who are marginalized and victims of violence. And that has already grown in more than 30 countries during the last 2.5 years. They are influencing policies as active and responsible consumers. They are asking the big companies not to use child labor and child slaves in their supply chains. They are also demanding for laws, for due diligence, and so on. Now, the leaders of 100 million campaign, the All African Student Union, for example, the European Student Unions, some Latin American unions of young people and students, those who are the part of this campaign, they have launched a new initiative, new campaign, what we call Fair Share for Every Child, Fair Share for Children. And the demand is simple and clear, that 20% of the COVID-19 related budgetary allocations and funds which are allocated must go to poorest 20% children of the world. When there was about $5 trillion announcement came from the rich countries, the demand was simple and clear that at least $1 trillion should be spent for freedom, safety, health, and education of marginalized children. If we lose this, as I mentioned before, the danger is that many more children may be trafficked, may be enslaved, may be forced to work as child labor because their parents have lost their livelihood, traditional livelihoods and jobs. The poverty is going to affect everyone. But the worst affected would be the children, refugee children. That crisis is also a serious crisis, and we are collecting all information that how the children on move, those who are displaced due to global warming and other kind of violence and other things, they are already facing the problem. Now, COVID-19 has exacerbated those injustices which were already there. So this is the right time when we should learn that no problem in the world could be seen and solved in isolation. We have to learn mutual responsibility. We have to learn gratitude. And I would always call that we have to create a supply chain of gratitude. Supply chain of gratitude. That means when I'm sitting here and talking to you, I should feel that it is possible because of somebody has built this house. The masons, the carpenters, the painters, electricians, plumbers, I have to be grateful to them. We can learn this value of gratitude. If I'm eating and sitting safely, I should feel thankful to those farmers and workers and their families. I'm wearing this clothes, but somebody has stitched them. So if we learn to feel the gratitude, we can create a better society, more mutually responsible society. Therefore, dear friends, I would once again call upon the young people. You need not to look for heroes outside. Nelson Mandela is inside your veins and your blood. Gandhi is inside you. Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy is inside you. There are heroes around you and inside you. You are the leader. You are the change maker. You are the champion. You are the change. You can be inspired by anyone, but you have to sit on the driving seat. You have to lead the formation of a new world. I call upon you to be the strong voices for this campaign, 100 million campaign, and in particular, fair share campaign that you can do, dear Ubuntu young friends. I would sum up with something which Indian Vedas, the sages of India have always spoken and guided us thousands of years ago. Sangachadvam samvadadvam samvo manansi janatam deva bhagam yatha purve sanjananam upasate. That means let us walk together. We have to create a level playing field to walk together. We have to learn how to walk together. We have to talk with one tongue. We have to globalize compassion. We have to talk the language of love and loving kindness and the mutual responsibility. We have to join hands together for creating a better world. That is going to happen. After each catastrophe or crisis, the humanity has emerged much more brighter, much more stronger. Even in the Second World War, after the Second World War, the international community realized that we need to work together and formed United Nations. So I agree with my brother, President Horta and Muhammad Yunus, that we should not lose this opportunity. Young people are the commonwealth of entire humanity. They are the common drivers and leaders for a better future. Thank you so much. Thank you once again.
Mr. Satyarthi, thank you so much. We feel very honored with your presence. Ubuntu Leaders Academy around the world support 100% the 100 million campaign, and certainly we will work together. Thank you so much. José, come back to you to close this panel. Closing remarks.
To save time, I won't say much except to thank Muhammad Yunus, Kailash Satyarthi for taking the time to join us on this day, July 18, to celebrate Mandela and continue to be inspired by him, and also be inspired by precisely people like Muhammad Yunus, Kailash Satyarthi, and many others we will hear in the next few hours. And hear also from you, young people across the planet. The present is yours, the future is yours. So we hope that based on our respective experiences, accumulated experiences, what we have done in our lives, you can improve on what we have done or we have failed, and carry on the torch of Nelson Mandela of solidarity, reconciliation, building bridges among peoples, cultures, religions all over the world. I thank you, Rui Marques.
agora a português. Mohamed Yunus, como percebemos, está a mobilizar através do Yunus Center uma petição global para tornar a vacina do Covid-19 um bem comum mundial. Sobre esta ação, Yunus afirma que, em última análise, a única maneira de erradicar definitivamente a pandemia é ter uma vacina que possa ser administrada a todos os habitantes do planeta, independentemente da sua raça, credo, geografia ou condição socioeconómica. A Academia de Líderes Ubuntu associa-se a esta iniciativa, pedindo a todos os que participam nesta conferência para que subscrevam a petição e que mobilizem os seus amigos, os seus familiares, todos os que estão à sua volta para que assinem esta petição. Está um link disponível na janela de bate-papo, de chat, basta clicar para poder assinar. Também Kailash Satyarthi está a procurar mobilizar a comunidade mundial em torno da segurança e do acesso à educação de centenas de milhares de crianças. A plataforma 1 Million tem como objetivo mobilizar 100 milhões de pessoas pelos direitos de 100 milhões de crianças que vivem em situação de extrema pobreza, sem acesso à saúde, à educação, à alimentação, vítimas de trabalho infantil e de completa insegurança. A Academia de Líderes Ubuntu. Os líderes Ubuntu, um pouco por todo o mundo, hoje aqui reunidos no Dia Internacional Nelson Mandela, associam-se igualmente a esta campanha por um mundo onde todas as crianças possam ser livres, estar em segurança e terem acesso à educação. Pedimos-vos também, por isso, que subscrevam esta campanha. O link está disponível no ecrã, no bate-papo, no chat. Contamos com o vosso apoio a estas duas campanhas. Foi um grande privilégio, claro, termos a oportunidade de ouvir a inspiração de 3 prémios Nobel da Paz, pessoas extraordinárias que nos inspiram a partir das suas experiências de luta e de valorização da dignidade humana para também nos comprometermos com a construção de um mundo melhor. Avançamos agora para o próximo painel. O terceiro painel deste Congresso Mundial, inspirado por Nelson Mandela e pelo seu exemplo como verdadeiro construtor de pontes, integra várias personalidades que se deixaram inspirar pelo legado deste líder. A partir de 10 diferentes geografias, cada uma destas personalidades vai ajudar-nos a refletir sobre o testemunho e o legado de Mandela nas suas experiências de trabalho e intervenção comunitária, social e política. E começamos pelos Estados Unidos com Kerry Kennedy. Kerry Kennedy é escritora e presidente da Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Center, uma organização sem fins lucrativos que honra também o legado de um homem extraordinário, Robert Kennedy. Há mais de 35 anos que se dedica à luta pela justiça equitativa, a promoção e proteção dos direitos humanos e a preservação do Estado de Direito. Serviu e continua a fazer parte de várias organizações por todo o mundo, trabalhando principalmente no domínio dos direitos humanos. Vamos ouvir Kerry Kennedy.
Hi, I'm Kerry Kennedy and I'm the president of Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights. So happy to join you today. In 1994, I was in Cape Town at the time of Nelson Mandela's inauguration. It was an incredible moment of the triumph of good over evil. Nelson Mandela gave heart and hope to the entire world that nothing is impossible, that even in the face of the most horrific atrocities, the human spirit will triumph, that even we can forgive our enemies. We can let go of all the pain and the burdens we carry from our anger at injustices big and small. And in that forgiveness, we can appeal to the better angels of our nature, and we can build a world based on justice and mercy and love. And at that very time, on that very day, the hotel doctor called me and told me that I was not only pregnant, but I was expecting twins. Imagine my joy. Imagine my hope and confidence that I was bringing into the world, this brave new world, children of the sun. To me, it seems like yesterday. But when I look at my twin daughters, Cara and Mariah, now age 25, and I meet South Africa's born frees who never lived under apartheid, I see youth who must forge their futures, who cannot afford to nor have any interest in idly celebrating the triumphs of their parents and grandparents. I see a new generation with their own battles to fight and to win. 52 years ago, my parents came to the University of Cape Town at an important time in our country and in South Africa. Daddy had been Attorney General of the United States, our Minister of Justice at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. He sought to bring the power of the federal government to the aid of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, and the local civil rights activists who were standing up to oppression of local governments, governors, mayors, and chiefs of police, primarily across the South in Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and beyond. During that time, there was no group he admired more than John Lewis and the Freedom Riders, a group of 13 Black and white young people who rode buses across the South, defying local laws and using the opposite race's bathrooms and water fountains. They risked imprisonment, torture, and death. He was awed by their courage and their commitment to nonviolence, but he believed that ultimately the civil rights movement would be won through the power of law. So he sought to use the Department of Justice to enforce equal rights enshrined in our Constitution, and he worked hard for the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. He saw the parallels between the struggles to overcome racial hatred in the United States and South Africa. So when UCT student and NUSAS leader Ian Robertson invited him to come with Alex Verrain as the NUSAS emissary, much to their surprise, Daddy was delighted to accept. At home, he was regarded with suspicion, even fear and loathing by President Johnson, and as a possible rival in the upcoming presidential elections. The US State Department discouraged his plans and tried mightily to stop him from coming. For 5 months, the government of South Africa refused to give him a visa. Then Pretoria announced no one from the government would meet with him. Just before the trip, Pretoria revoked the visas of 40 members of the international press who had planned to accompany my parents. More than anything, Daddy wanted to meet the great Chief Albert Luthuli, the advocate for nonviolent resistance, president of the ANC, and winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, who had been banned and forced into exile outside of Durban. At the time, rumors were rife that South African security forces had just a few years earlier shot down the helicopter carrying UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, killing the world leader. Undeterred, my parents arranged to take an undisclosed helicopter trip to Groutville to meet Chief Luthuli. When Daddy arrived in Johannesburg, he was given no security detail. He and my mother were on their own. In the midst of this tense environment, Bobby Kennedy came to South Africa to listen and to learn. Thousands of people of all racial backgrounds showed up to greet him at the airport. Daddy met with as many people as he could, asking questions, trying to learn. He went to Johannesburg, Cape Town, Stellenbosch, Groutville, Soweto, and then Wits. When my parents flew into Cape Town, Daddy asked the pilot to fly low over Robben Island and tip their wings for Nelson Mandela and the Rivonia prisoners below. The pilot had his license revoked.
A memória da visita de Bob Kennedy à África do Sul, onde fez um dos mais importantes discursos, Pequenas Ondas de Esperança, assim se chamava, foi da maior importância. Kerry Kennedy aqui nos recordou como também deste homem extraordinário nós pudemos recordar o seu contributo para ajudar a construir um mundo melhor. E agora, neste painel, seguimos para um outro continente, uma outra realidade. Teremos agora o gosto de convidar a princesa Rim Ali, da Jordânia. Royal Highness Princess Rim Ali of Jordan is a journalist, founded an NGO that aims to establish an Arab Center of Excellence for Journalist Education. She had an extensive career in international broadcasters such as CNN, BBC, and others. Princess Rim Ali, it's a great honor to have your participation in this Mandela Bridges World E-Summit. Welcome.
Thank you so much. President Ramos Horta, dear friend, I agree with you with your idea of a global Marshall Plan. Dr. John Volmink, Dr. Rim Marquez, Mr. Ndaba Mandela. We're very sorry for the loss of Zinzi Mandela. And most of all, dear young leaders of the prestigious Ubuntu Academy, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this international event, which marks the legacy of one of the most extraordinary individuals in our planet's history, and his leadership is indeed sorely missed. I just have a few introductory remarks to make, and then I'd like to talk about three elements which I believe this pandemic has shown we need more than ever if we want to build bridges. We are all now emerging from months of lockdown, fear and sadness. Lives were lost, others were saved. Jobs have been lost, others have yet to be reimagined. And despite everything, we are now wondering, can we turn this into an opportunity for the good of mankind somehow? The virus forced countries to close borders and limited all the interaction at a global scale that we had been taking for granted. And in so doing, it actually did bring the whole world of humanity together. It took this small but very frightening and potentially lethal virus to make everyone talk and connect across oceans more than ever before, and to realize our shared humanity, like an awakening. But without this pandemic, how much longer would it have taken us to fully appreciate the absurdity of conflicts when there is death looming over every doorstep, or to realize the importance of solidarity, the importance of kindness and compassion? Once our physical bridges, the planes, the ships, the trains were taken away, when our physical gathering spaces were banned, we stepped up. We used virtual bridges at our disposal, like this one, to see one another, to celebrate, for example, Nelson Mandela's extraordinary legacy. And though we were all confined to our homes, there were so many interactions. We did feel the need to reach out, to reconnect with others. There were panels, there's been webinars, social media exchanges, jokes. We all experienced a huge feeling of solidarity with men, women, and children, from Milano to Wuhan or elsewhere. There were messages of support to those locked at home, attempts to alleviate their burden. Here in Jordan, everyone rallied, and like in many other countries, human beings felt it was normal for those who could to reach out and donate money when they could to help the most destitute. But I also can't remember a time when artists and cultural institutions were so generous in sharing their creations, their thoughts, their books, their movies, their art collections, their archives, and made them so accessible to everybody, mostly free of charge. And I believe that that has been an extraordinary show of solidarity, which has given us a sort of can-do attitude towards positive change. And I really hope it will encourage those maybe among our young leaders of the Ubuntu Academy who may have maybe wondered at some point, how can I change humanity when I can barely change my own circumstances? To know that it is possible, because many continue to push for change at great risk to their lives. To start with, the health workers, those who went into the streets and marched, others by just reminding us of our humanity through culture. And that is when we realize what brings us together, or that Ubuntu is indeed a reality. The pandemic has revealed some strong dysfunctionalities, notably in terms of inequalities and civil liberties. Maybe more than anybody in recent history, Nelson Mandela understood that to work on these injustices and inequalities and to bring everyone together, it was necessary to build bridges. And to do that, you had to not only reach out to your opponent or to the other, you had to also speak their language. He was able to talk with those who took away his freedom and that of entire generations. It reminds me of something that my father has had to explain over and over again when involved in work to help bring warring parties to the negotiating table. My father is today a member of the Elders Group that was founded by Nelson Mandela. He is retired from the United Nations, but he led the UN mission that supported the first post-apartheid election in South Africa. And he continues to dedicate his efforts to peace and justice. He was often asked throughout his career and until now, why would you speak with these people? Do you not know the dreadful things they have done? And he invariably replies, that is exactly why we have to talk with them, because you do not make peace with your friend, you make peace with your enemy. History has shown that ignorance and fear of one another are at the root of these stark differences. There are touching stories of Mandela himself reaching out even to people like Eugene Terblanche, the most pro-apartheid proponent of white supremacism, despite the fact that he knew he would never recognize him as president of South Africa. Mandela believed that you could overcome even the most staunch of your opponents with acceptance. Rwandans, for example, Hutus and Tutsis have somehow found a way to work together after a genocide. President Ramos Horta himself is the living example of someone who has consistently built bridges between East Timor and its powerful and once threatening neighbor. And he cited the example of the world today, and what it was at the end of World War II in Europe. In all these cases, it has been possible to have a process of reconciliation, a process from which I believe, and I wish that so many countries in my region, the Middle East, could benefit. So the three elements I'd like to address here, which I believe are central, if they're harnessed in a way that underlines our shared humanity, are the roles of education, media, and culture. They have been extremely powerful in building those bridges, and they can do even more if they're really given the right support. I'm proud to say that a few years ago, my country's Curriculum Commission devoted an entire chapter to Nelson Mandela and his legacy in our public school sixth grade humanities school book. Education is what enables us to develop a better knowledge of the other. Ignorance breeds fear of the other, and very often that leads to violence. It leads to nurses being mistreated because of the color of their skin. It can lead to anyone Asian looking being insulted or assaulted because some people refer to COVID-19 as the Chinese virus. Throughout this health crisis, though, many people realized that their lives were in the hands of refugees who they thought had at times come to their countries to take rather than contribute. Building a collective memory can be a powerful tool, but if it is taught in schools without compassion or understanding, or without the values of acceptance and inclusion that Mandela embodied, it can turn into ultranationalism and exclusion. Today, there is a unique opportunity to build not merely a national collective memory, but a global one in the aftermath of this pandemic, one that revolves around Ubuntu. And tomorrow, though it will have been a tragic episode in humanity's history, there will be a narrative around which we can all rally. Children around the world will learn in history books of a virus that affected everyone, no matter where they were or the color of their skin, so that maybe they will choose cooperation over isolationism, solidarity over divisionism, and maybe they will also help to redress the economic inequalities that many of you have already spoken of. The media has been a crucial vector in conveying these realities and these unfamiliar challenges, so that nobody anywhere in the world can say they did not know. Journalists have done an outstanding job, and so have many citizen journalists. Reports in the media means we have all seen how inequalities and injustice affect the treatment that one gets. And this makes it all our duty to try and fix this. The US is a striking example, of course, with the largest number of deaths from corona, and the one where Black and Hispanic communities were mostly affected. And no matter where you are on this planet, you cannot ignore the movement Black Lives Matter that mobilized millions in different parts of the world. George Floyd's tragic death, caught on video, thanks precisely to a citizen journalist, forced people who may not have previously been aware of that to realize that racism runs deeper than we may think. It was a brutal and tragic reminder of injustice. It is an image, along with the sound of his dying words, that we in our family will never forget. It has resonated around the world and helped victims of racism come forward, less fearful and more empowered to point out to injustices being committed. As protests swept through the US and indeed throughout the whole world, the TV host Trevor Noah spoke eloquently of a social contract that had been broken. And now I would really like to point out here that there are others, victims of summary executions or of systematic shoot to kill policies, whose deaths, though caught on video, went unnoticed in the past couple of months. Ahmed Arakat, a young Palestinian man, was shot at a checkpoint by Israeli soldiers on June 23rd, while he was unarmed and posed no threat. He was supposed to be married a month later. Less than a month before the tragic incident, Iyad Halak, another Palestinian with special needs, was shot dead by the Israeli police in East Jerusalem. There was no worldwide mobilization for them, perhaps because in an occupation, there isn't even a social contract to begin with. We can also not ignore, thanks to the media, that there are rich countries with poor people who do not have proper access to healthcare. Brazil, where its indigenous population risk being wiped out, is an example. Iraq, where people are tearing each other apart to get oxygen bottles when they produce so much oil, is also another case. And the staggering figures of hunger that we have heard. Our awareness, our knowledge, our understanding of the other during this crisis have increased thanks to the media, as well as other means of other means of connection disappeared one after the other. And it should also push us into action at every opportunity to push for change in the immediate future and to push for things like Muhammad Yunus was mentioning, a global vaccine for all. The third element I want to mention is the power of culture to build bridges. And that's what strikes me the most, and why culture is not just nice to have, but must have. In the middle of this pandemic, culture and art have been the most satisfying bonds. Artistic productions of all kinds can help us express and understand our realities, or those from bygone eras. But in this pandemic, they have shown also how they can be escapes from the current and difficult realities. In times of crisis, food, of course, is always the basic necessity. But right after that comes food for the mind. Any refugee who has run away from conflict or misery will tell you that food is not enough. Human dignity demands that the mind be nurtured as well. Art and creativity are like oxygen that allow us to heal and be more resilient. With artists, culture becomes an engine for recovery. It is the space for empathy and hope. The French novelist André Malraux, who was culture minister of France in the 60s, said, "Art is the shortest path from one man to another and a bridge between nations." And if we take cinema, for example, cinema is by essence about transnational coordination, mobility, co-production. With borders and cinemas closed, movies have suffered, but they've also demonstrated their importance in this pandemic. And for anyone who still believes that art is useless or a luxury, try spending quarantine or lockdown without movies, music, books, poems, or paintings. More than ever, artists have enriched our lives day after day in confinement, just with creations of their own. They've truly shown us, by continuing to be heard as all others of activities of society were silenced, that there is no shared humanity without culture, as the author Yasmina Khadra says. And beyond that, artists remain at the core of democratic thought and development, which today are hugely threatened. So, as we figure out how to offer access to education in a pandemic, how to reach out via the media with accurate information to enable people to make the right decisions that will affect us all, and how culture allows us to truly see one another as humans in all our diversity, it emerges that democracy cannot thrive in a system where injustice prevails because it is also economically unfair. And I believe that, generally speaking, pretty much anywhere in the world, the core elements that can bring about a truly fair and more democratic culture based on the human being at the center, and that can ultimately help us repair, or where needs be, redefine this social contract, but also are not just equal access to food and healthcare on the long term. They're also proper access to education, proper access to information, and proper access to culture. Well-informed, responsible citizens are future voters and empowered decision makers. They choose to build bridges rather than erect walls. The value of offering media literacy in schools is now even more obvious. Teaching our children not to hate, but to communicate and reach out is much more powerful on the long run than investing in weapons. And maybe this is the language that, like Mandela, we must all learn in order to continue building bridges with others, though we may disagree with them. and talk the same language, as Kailash Satyarthi pointed out. I am human, and I think nothing human is alien to me. The historian Terence wrote these words at a time when Romans considered everyone else as a barbarian. A lot has changed, but humans are still somehow divided on this planet between immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, people who need visas, documented and undocumented aliens. We have all been at some point, or someone in our family has been at some point an immigrant, a refugee, someone who desperately needs a visa. We may even have ancestors from regions that were once at war with one another, although we all stem from the same place in Africa hundreds and thousands of years ago. Most of us seek today to build bridges because we are all related across continents and oceans and across cultures. And because, as Edward Lorenz said, when a butterfly flutters its wings in one part of the world, it can eventually cause a hurricane in another. So I would urge you all, young leaders of this truly inspiring and extraordinary Ubuntu Academy, to actively pursue the legacy of Nelson Mandela, no matter the challenges, no matter the cynicism around. By talking with those who disagree with you, even outside of these circles. And I would really encourage you to find new solutions to these problems and to really reach out and find ways of exchanging and becoming more, encouraging more cooperation. There's a lot that can be done. It needs new thinking. Our history, the history of humankind, has always been one of mobility and of connection. And if this pandemic has shown us anything at all, it is that we are not just potential carriers of a disease. Whether we are locked down or protesting, whether we are learning online, performing or writing, we are these bridges we seek to build. And if everyone is just made aware of that, I think we'll have made huge strides towards spreading the notion of Ubuntu. Thank you all very much.
Dear Princess Reem Ali, thank you so much for your brilliant remarks in this Mandela Bridges Summit. It's really an honor your presence with us. Seguimos para o terceiro convidado desta nossa sessão, deste painel, e regressamos à Europa. O nosso convidado é agora Carlos Moedas, foi comissário europeu encarregado dos dossiês da ciência e tecnologia, é atualmente administrador da Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian, a instituição fundamental que tem apoiado desde o seu início até à atualidade a Academia de Líderes Ubuntu. É por isso uma grande honra e um gosto contar com a presença de Carlos Moedas. Bem-vindo.
Olá a todos, muito boa tarde. Thank you so much, Rui. Thank you so much for inviting me for this event. And you know, I'm a big fan of your work over the years, and the Gulbenkian Foundation is also a big fan of your work. So it's a great pleasure to share with you a couple of stories of how Mandela himself has influenced me as a young man and as a person, and then as a politician. I will never forget that day of February 11th, 1990, the release of that man, and the fact that I was a young man from the south of Portugal, looking into the world and thinking how amazing that man that was born in a small village, spent 30 years in jail, changing the world. That really gave us, for my generation, an amazing hope. And that hope gave me exactly that power of thinking that I could achieve myself without money to go to the US and be accepted at Harvard Business School. And here I goes. In 1998, I was accepted to get into the Harvard Business School. And then I met one woman that really changed my life, a professor, Linda Hill, who basically was one of the people, the first African-American professor as a woman to be tenured at Harvard Business School. And she had the luck to meet Nelson Mandela, to work with Nelson Mandela. And she was the first one that told me the story about this idea that Nelson Mandela was a bridge builder, which is a very powerful idea. And at the time, to be frank, I didn't get it. I didn't get the power of that until much later in my life, because she would tell us in our courses, in our student times that we would share with her stories, that ability of building bridges was exactly what the world needed. And more than ever, the world today needs that we are able to build those bridges. And I'm talking about 3 different types of bridges. The first one is a bridge that we have to cross in between the physical world and the digital world. The second one is a bridge that links science with people, that links the different sciences, that intersects the different disciplines. And the third bridge is the bridge that connects people with governments. That will be the way that politicians work in the next 10 years, to link everyone to co-create the future. But let me start by the first bridge, the bridge that connects the physical world, that was the world of my generation, with the digital world. And you know, Nelson Mandela in 1995, in a speech that he gave in a telecom conference, he was talking exactly about the power of technology. And he said that technology connects the world and bridges divides and promotes human development. And I think the biggest challenge that we have as politicians ahead of us is that we think, and most of us think, that technology is about basically science. And today technology is about political choices. Those political choices that Nelson Mandela was speaking in 1995. The choice that we want technology to help us. We want technology to get us to be better people, but we don't want technology to replace us. We don't want a technology that is centered in that technology. We want a technology that is centered in our human nature. And I think that's the power of Europe, is that the choice of Europe has been, in the last years, the ability to put science at the center of the human being, science at the center of the values of people. And so that choice will change, definitely, the way that we look into the future, the way that we look into the technology itself. Look at what happened in the pandemics. We that for 5, 10, 20 years were talking about how technology could change universities, but never happened because professors were too afraid that they would be replaced by technology. And then in a couple of weeks, everything changed. Technology came into our lives and professors started giving their courses online. It happened during these pandemics. For years, we were tell doctors that we could have basically consultations online. And doctors would say, no, that's impossible. We have to be with the patients. And suddenly during pandemics, it really changed. For years, we thought that we could not work like this at home. And now we are able to do it. And I think the positive message, and we have to think that even in a pandemics, we have positive messages, is that we have crossed that bridge. But the fact is that if we cross that bridge, we even have to give more value to the personal relationship that we have with people. So if the doctor is giving a consultation online, it makes that he has more time to focus and to be with people that really need to be with him in his physical presence, because that will be always essential for our life. Professors will give lectures online for 300 people, but then they will spend more time helping students one-to-one to mentor them into the future. That's the job that the professor should be doing. And so I think that these pandemics, with all the trouble that has caused to us, has helped us on this bridge in between the physical and the digital world, and will get us to a better world, I'm sure. The world that people and the young leaders like you will be dealing with in the next 10 years. The second bridge that I wanted to talk about is this bridge in between sciences. A lot of you think because your parents had a profession, they had one single discipline. And so they tell you that you one day will be a doctor or be a lawyer or be a scientist in a determined science like physics or sociology or anthropology. I think that one of the things that Nelson Mandela, and never forget that he was the one who created the South African Academy of Sciences. So in 1996, he was creating the basis for science in South Africa as the African Academy of Sciences. And in his speech, he was talking exactly about these bridges. The bridges that today science is about collaboration. So you can be very good in one field, but that's not enough, because today you have to collaborate. You have to come from different types of sciences. You have to put science and technology with arts and science, and that's when you discover something new. You know, Einstein in 1915, he wrote alone one article called The General Theory of Relativity, and he changed the world. 100 years later, in 2015, the people that actually confirmed what Einstein wrote 100 years ago with the gravitational waves discovery, that was an amazing discovery a couple of years ago, they were 1,000 scientists from all over the world. Scientists from Jordan, from Israel, from the United States, from France, from Italy, from Portugal, all together. Why? Because today you cannot do it alone. So science was like national pride, the best country, the best university, and that is over. That's those bridges that Nelson Mandela was talking about in 1996 in his speech of creation of the Academy of Sciences of South Africa. And finally, the last bridge that I wanted to talk to you is the bridge that worries me the most, is the bridge between governments and people and young people. Young people are far from politics. They have other interests, and that is very dangerous. And this I'm talking exactly for you, the Ubuntu leaders, because you're gonna be the ones that will have to change the way we look into politics. Politics was created in a physical world with physical institutions where everything was top down. But suddenly the digital world comes, and the digital world is not top down, it's actually bottom up. So the whole thing changed, but the institutions didn't. And that's why you have no interest in politics. A lot of you don't have, because the institutions have to change. And so you'll be the ones that will change those institutions, because today, as Linda Hill, my Harvard professor, says, no one wants to be led by a vision. You want to co-create that vision with the politicians. You want to be part of the creation of the future. You don't want to have a visionary leader that does it alone. And never forget, because this is so amazing, is that Nelson Mandela himself, when he was released after 30 years of jail, do you remember his words? Because they were really profound. He said, I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. And I think that was the vision, is that he was really a leader ahead of his time. He was a leader that knew how to listen. You know, I've been in politics now for 10 years. And one of the things that I always found is that politicians of the generation before my generation, after a certain time, they don't listen anymore. They talk, but they don't listen. And Nelson Mandela had this ability of listening to people. And that's where the Ubuntu is so powerful for your future. Because if I am because you are, I can only be if I listen to you. And so those are the things that really, I think, these men influenced me as a person, a young kid coming from the south of Portugal, from a poor family, that one day goes out to the world. And I think that a lot of you are thinking, sitting there in your home, how can I change the world? How can I be the person that will make changes? And I think that when you look at the example of Nelson Mandela, who would in those times think that that young kid would change the world? Look at President Ramos Horta. Look at people that really changed things. They changed it because they were passionate about it. They changed it because they never gave up. They changed it because they created these bridges. And that's what we hope from you, from your generation. So thank you so much for inviting me. It was really a pleasure to listen. to so many inspiring speeches. And I wish you the best for your future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Muito obrigado, Carlos Moedas. É uma honra contar com a sua presença e agradecer uma vez mais o apoio da Fundação Carlos Gulbenkian, que também torna possível este evento hoje do Dia Internacional Nelson Mandela. E avançamos no nosso programa. Temos agora o gosto de apresentar o Presidente Danilo Turk, que nos chega da Eslovénia. President Danilo Turk is a former president of Slovenia. Before he was a professor of international law, an expert on human rights, a diplomat of United Nations Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs. He currently president of World Leadership Alliance, Club of Madrid, an organization of 112 former presidents and prime ministers. Club of Madrid was one of the main supporters of this event. I'd like to give the floor to the President Danilo Turk and thank you so much for your presence and the support of the World Leadership Alliance to this event.
Thank you. Thank you very much, my friends, and I would like to express my gratitude for having invited me to join this important Mandela Bridges World Summit, a summit that addresses some of the most fundamental questions of our time and tries to figure out the right path forward based on the great legacy of Nelson Mandela, the political and moral giant of 20th century, and the person who has influenced millions of people around the world. Now, I'm joining this conversation with a great sense of humility, and I would like to make only 3 points. But of course, before that and above that, I would like to listen to what was said already and be inspired by the discussion which is already taking place. I would like to start with a small memoir. Nelson Mandela was a great name back in 1970s and 80s. At that time, I was a student and a young academic. And for me and for thousands, I should say, perhaps millions of students around the world, Nelson Mandela was a single name, one name, which symbolized the ideas of freedom, equality, and future. That is how we saw his struggle. And that is how many of us have joined the struggle against apartheid in a very wide variety of ways around the world. So he was an inspiring leader with his moral message when he was in prison and when he was released. Later in 1994 and 1995, I had the opportunity to meet him in person. And again, I was deeply impressed by the fact that he was a person who held no grudge, who had an extraordinary sense of humor, and a very humane approach to talking to people, to everybody. He thanked the United Nations at that time, and that was the context in which we met in the General Assembly in 94 and later in 95 at the World Social Summit in Copenhagen. And he talked about his own life experience and was able to define the ideas for the future with great clarity, and I would say unique simplicity. Now, these are the kind of qualities which we need today. We live, as we have heard from the speakers so far, in an extraordinarily important moment of history, at a moment when things can change and ought to change very fundamentally. This is the time when ambitious ideas are called for. This is not the time to be afraid of big ideas. Let us just recall the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who sent this message to our conference, spoke about the need for a new global social contract. An enormously ambitious idea, but probably an idea for which the time has come. José Ramos Horta, my friend with whom we worked for decades, he spoke about a global Marshall Plan. Again, an ambitious idea and vision, something that should be worked upon now. And then Mohammed Yunus, who spoke about the idea of changing the world fundamentally, which is not only something that is necessary, but something that has become possible and indeed almost compulsory as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Let us think about the ambition level of these ideas. And if we do, we would see the importance of Mandela's legacy, Mandela's vision, and Mandela's capacity of building bridges. Now, these sort of ideas are not only necessary, they are also possible, but they are possible only if we have clearly in mind some of the basic precepts of Nelson Mandela's work and approach to politics, to morality, to human nature. Now, it was explained that I'm currently president of the Club de Madrid, which is a group of former presidents and prime ministers who were democratically elected and who are aware of the difficulties of governing. We are therefore committed to some of these fundamental ideas since a long time ago. One of them is the idea of shared societies. We know that no positive change can happen in a society if society is divided. So overcoming divisions in society is necessary for progress. Some of those divisions based on race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, social status, some of those divisions are very deep and very difficult to overcome. But it is precisely because are deep and difficult to overcome that we have to be very persistent on insisting that we all share one society. And therefore, in the spirit of sharing of society, we have to be capable of finding solutions to the practical problems as they arise. Many of us, I also was among one of the members of the Club de Madrid in the past years, go to individual countries and talk to political leaders, to non-governmental organizations, to media, to religious groups, to figure out how to overcome the divisions in the different societies on the basis of the idea of sharing. We share our future, we share our society, and we should be able to build bridges among ourselves to make that sharing a path towards the future. Now, all this may sound pretty abstract, but I can tell you, in the context of every individual society, this is very practical, either because of the need to overcome divisions of race, historically established and persistence, or ethnicity, or other factors. But now we find ourselves in a particular moment where we all have to think about overcoming the crisis created by the COVID-19 disease. And here again, the idea that we share our societies and our global society is fundamental. And it can be developed into practical building of bridges. Now, speakers before me have already talked about the need to emphasize the importance of developing vaccines, making vaccines available to all people. Vaccines are needed by all people and should be divided, should be available to all people. Now that, of course, means building bridges and overcoming divisions, and overcoming, in particular, the domination of profit motive. Now, this is a difficult task, a practical and difficult task, but it is one which has to be taken as central and immediate. Within a few months, perhaps a year at most, we shall know whether the humankind is capable of fulfilling that task, of making COVID-19 vaccines ready, available free of charge, and in a timely fashion, available to people around the world. This is an important priority task, and we should know the basis of building bridges already exists. There is in the international laws already a platform for that. The International Covenant on Civil, on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights contains an article, Article 12, which proclaims the right of each individual to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. Now, that right is accompanied by corresponding obligations of all states. All states have to work individually and collectively, including globally, for making that right a real one. That real access to that right means making prevention, treatment, and control of epidemics and pandemics fundamental. In other words, we have a legal basis, we have technological capacity, we have everything available, including money. The European Union has convened an important conference a couple of months ago, which raised about $8 billion for development and distribution of vaccines. It is a critically important test for the humankind to make sure that vaccines are made available to all people around the world in a timely fashion. If that happens, we would know that the world is on the right path, and I hope we shall realize that. Now, my second point relates to the economic improvement. We have heard already from José Ramos Horta, from Mohamed Yunus and others about the depth of the problems that have been created by the COVID-19. And I'm not going to repeat all the valid analytical points that were already made. I would only like to say that it is clear that the world needs debt relief for about 80 countries, the least developed countries of the world, the members of the International Development Association, who would need immediate debt relief. And the basic global debt restructuring will be necessary in the future. There will be a need for investment in public sector in order to make sure that health systems not only survive, but become capable of handling health crises of the future. There will be a need to develop economic framework globally in a manner that would allow figuring out the solutions for each country and all people. An important task. Now, Club de Madrid, our organization, is committed not only and has not supported only the action for the vaccines, but has already pleaded with the G20, the 20 most developed or most important economic countries of the world, to find a way in that direction. Specific proposals were made for that purpose. I'm not going to repeat them or go into the details of them, but what I would like to say, in about a year from now, we shall know whether the world is on the right track or not. And we shall also know where the responsibility is. The responsibility clearly is within the G20 and the countries which can, if they put their act together, lead us forward. Leading us forward means that the world has to make a few further steps towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goal, the great agenda that United Nations has developed 5 years ago. The world knows what needs to be done. The world knows what needs to be done in the immediate future and in the long-term future. So we shall know whether that is possible. And how are the bridges, building bridges and Mandela's legacy relevant here? What I would like to say is a very clear and perhaps even a simple conclusion. The tasks ahead of us are big and in many ways new, but the basic attitude is well known, and it was brought to us by Nelson Mandela. It is a legacy of building bridges. It is a legacy of our understanding of commonality. It is the legacy of our conference, which is also part of that whole understanding. It is the legacy of the idea of Ubuntu. And I'm very pleased that our conference is an opportunity to make a contribution in that regard. Thank you for your attention, and I will continue listening.
Thank you so much, President Danilo Turk. The role of the Club of Madrid in these issues is very, very important, and we are very happy with this connection, this working together. Thank you so much. E regressamos à Europa. Vou navegando entre o inglês e o português. Como sabem, podem acompanhar com uma das 4 línguas oficiais desta nossa conferência. Basta para isso clicar em interpretação na parte de baixo do vosso ecrã e escolher inglês, francês, espanhol ou português quando é necessário poder ter o apoio de uma tradução. É um gosto continuar a contar convosco e agora vamos até a Irlanda. Temos connosco Bertin Ahern. Ahern was elected in 1997 as a Ireland Prime Minister. He took part of the peace negotiations that culminated in April 10, 1998 in a historical settlement between Roman Catholic nationalists and Protestant unionists. Over the North Ireland should remain part of the United Kingdom. Mr. Bertin Ahern, is a great honor for us to have your presence in this conference. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a great privilege to join with the co-chairs, and good to see you all. Good to listen to so many excellent speakers. My friend Daniel Turk, who's just been on, and to listen to someone, and great to see President Ramos Horta again, who 20 years ago when we met up in his country when I was Prime Minister. I want to say really just a few messages and stick to the point that I was asked about, is how do participants you know, can look at how relationships are built in difficult circumstances in order to make an environment where negotiations can take place and where we can to try to bring things to peaceful settlement. Recently, my country were elected onto the Security Council for the first time. We just run about every 15 or 20 years, but it gave me an opportunity to read much of the cases of conflicts around the world, the current conflicts in so many countries, and the reasons behind so many of those conflicts. And to the young people that are today, and particularly in this Mandela's legacy and in this conference, I think it is for them to try to work and build for a world where we can get away from these terrible conflicts. And I think that the whole purpose of this excellent conference that you have put together, my congratulations to the co-chairs and to all of the organizers and participants, that looking at Nelson Mandela's legacy as a bridge builder, he was, to my generation, has been said many times, an inspiration to all of us. And as we deal with the issues of COVID-19, as we deal with economic issues, issues of racism and discrimination, I think we are all working for justice and respect for human dignity and solidarity, which is so important. But to do that, it's requiring bravery, as Mandela had, a trust and a willingness to forgive. It's not about forgetting. It's history cannot be passed over, but it is to forgive, an ability to be able to work together and to move on and seek better ways to construct peace and understanding. In Mandela's statement, he said it's easy to break down and destroy. The heroes are those who make peace and build. And that has always been my experience in my own country and in other conflicts that I've been engaged in. And I think it is easy to go with the crowd and be against things, but it is difficult to stand apart and say we're going to change, we're going to enter dialogue, we're going to build a new future. And as Mandela said, we are all branches of the same tree. Equality is absolute and unconditional. And the same is true of the importance of human life, and human diversity is crucial to all of us. And I think wealth created by ethnic, cultural, religious diversity is a force that should unite us all. And during this pandemic, I think we've seen a lot of areas where we've united. No one is, I think, born, as has been said in your notes at this conference, hating people because of religion or color of their skin or the past. People learn to hate, or people are almost taught to hate, and are taught to understand that there is an enemy. And I think there is violence and is the evil for all of us. And I think what we need is more respect, more tolerance, more understanding. Holding the hand of friendship is what is required. I want to say a few words about negotiations and just use our time. I think in theory, negotiations are all about goals. They're all about interests, and in actual fact, and I've found this to be true. And negotiations are about relationship, which are partners, which are opponents, and in building trust that allows them to move closer to your position without jeopardizing theirs. And as the title of our seminar suggests, we need to build sound bridges between those who we distrust and those who distrust us. And that is what I think we need in this world. And for the young people, I think that's what we need to be. It is so easy just to take your side and, you know, rant on about what you believe in, but it is to try and understand the other side. And I think all parties to the conflict must be present, and all issues must be on the table for discussion. I've always worked in negotiations. I've spent now over 30 years in one form or another involved negotiations in different parts of the world, but you have to eliminate preconditions. You have to appreciate the parties and leaders have constituencies standing behind them. You will need to work hard to win their trust and give them confidence that any process won't diminish them by virtue of entry into the discussion room. In my country, I spent with Tony Blair almost 10 years in negotiations to bring an end to half a century of conflict. And many dialogues and negotiations begin with participants adopting positions. And the key is to move people off their stated positions towards a compromise. And when leaders move off their position towards a deal, very often it is their own side that become restless and who have to recognize that movement can be slow and may need some compromises on your side in order to restore communities. So negotiations have to be delicately handled. They have to understand people. You have to understand sensitivities and the fears of others. And this is why I think Mandela's legacy has been so important, because I think it has taught us that. In Northern Ireland, I worked hard in building relationships with both Republican Unionist leaders, both Catholic and Protestants. I did this recognizing the fact that Republicans were very distrustful of the British government and that any process in which the British were seen to have the upper hand, they were suspicious of. Unionists, for their part, were fearful of the involvement of the Irish government, my government, along with other nationalist parties in the conflict. And that would tilt the balance the other way. So I think you have to build good relationships with both sides, and that doesn't come easy, but I think it's what Mandela has taught us. You have to try and work over a period of years and in building, as we did in Ireland, between Catholic and Protestant, between Unionists and Nationalists. And you can do this by gestures, by doing things that can respect the other side. In our case, we have these commemorations were very important to the Protestant side at the Battle of 1690. Now, people would think this is ridiculous, you know, that what's 1690 is a long time ago. But I have to tell you, the young people are as difficult as the old people in this issue. Young people commemorate this. It's very important to their heritage. So what we did was we bought the site from the government, bought the site and used it as kind of a museum and a commemoration of where this battle took place, so that we could show solidarity. And this, I think, is something that went down very well. And my job with Republicans was to be constantly aware that their leaders were moving their constituency away from violence and from hard ideological problems to which they were wedded for decades. And I was very attuned to the need for people like Jerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, names that have been known around the world in conflict resolution, to remove their organizations at different speeds away from violence and towards peace. And one compromise I think is necessary, but not necessary to lose your own organization. In my case, Tony Blair and I were great partners in the peace process, and we were able to work together. I want to move very quickly away from the Irish context and to where I've been involved for the last 3 years in Papua New Guinea, where we were trying to end the conflict that lost 24,000 people's lives, where people were set an issue that over the mine, the Banduna mine, and this led to thousands of people being killed. And there we had to find, in their culture, I chaired a referendum commission, and we had to find a new way to build reconciliation based on their cultures. First of all, to try and get agreement between the two sides to reconcile, following by a meeting with an exchange of gifts to show that peace has been restored. First public reconciliation then takes place, and then later there's further reconciliation. But it's all the time trying to understand the culture, understand the religious beliefs, understand what can bring people together. And I think to young people today, I think it is protest can be important. I think standing up for rights is massively important. But I think we need to be finding ways where we can bring people together, where we can get understanding of what the issues are, where we can understand what are the issues that divide us, and try to find ways of removing animosities, hatred, and to try to bring people together. That is the challenge for this generation. Otherwise, wars continue in 25 countries, thousands of lives are lost. We've seen what happened in so many countries over the last decade alone. And I think it is that I think spirit of young people to try to build a world that is a more peaceful world, where we can get unity of purpose, where we can get equality and inclusivity, where we can get respect and dignity. But I think I would urge young people to look at conflict resolution, to look. Now so many universities teach it, so many people are advocates of it. I have an opportunity of meeting many of them in different parts of the world. But I think it is the huge thing for the rising generation to see if we can build spirits. I readily admit, without mentioning any, that a lot of our leaders of the world don't show much good spirit many times in recent times. But you know, these things we're all birds of passage, and things change. So I think we all have to work together to do that. So can I congratulate this conference? Can I urge the young people that have participated to continue to work in a spirit of harmony and unity, to try and make it a more peaceful, a more dignified world, a more understanding world, where we can share our cultures, share what we believe in, but also try and have an understanding for the other side. And don't consider people enemies, just consider that there are things that we must understand. Chairman, my thanks to you all, and it is an honor to participate.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aaron. Your work for reconciliation in Ireland inspiring all of us. I'd like also to thanks to Jeffrey Corr and all friends from Glen Cree Center to build these bridges with some guests from Ireland. We will work together certainly in the next years for building bridges around the world. E mudamos agora de continente, vamos até a Nova Zelândia. A próxima convidada é uma mulher notável, Helen Clark. Foi primeira-ministro na Nova Zelândia entre 99 e 2008, tendo sido a segunda mulher do país a assumir essa função. É uma das mais respeitadas políticas em todo o mundo. Vamos ouvir as suas palavras.
When we remember the life of Nelson Mandela, we celebrate his vision for freedom, peace, and justice, his service to humanity, and the hope for a better tomorrow, which he represents to all of us to this day. He exemplified virtues of compassion and humanity, as summed up in the phrase Ubuntu, meaning I am, you are. This is the very essence of servant leadership. Many in my generation in New Zealand were inspired by Nelson Mandela's vision. We were shocked by the apartheid system in South Africa, which discriminated against people on the grounds of race and denied dignity and freedom. Dismantling that system and building a new, a free, and a democratic South Africa was the cause to which Nelson Mandela devoted his whole life. His courage was legendary. Who among us could ever forget the words of his closing statement to the South African Supreme Court on the 20th of April, 1964, when he said, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." What powerful words. But they didn't move that court in South Africa. It sentenced Nelson Mandela to life imprisonment, and he served 27 years of that sentence, almost 3 decades, 18 of them in the very harsh conditions of Robben Island off Cape Town, with many other political prisoners. I visited there in 2002. It is a harrowing experience to be there and to understand what those prisoners went through. Elsewhere in South Africa, people protesting against the unjust past laws were massacred at Sharpeville in 1960. Many school children lost their lives or were injured in the Soweto uprising of 1976. The anti-apartheid leader Steve Biko died in police custody after being brutally beaten in 1977. And countless tens of millions of South Africans endured a daily life of oppression and hardship. Opposing the regime was very dangerous. Targeted assassinations and bombings were carried out against opponents of apartheid inside and outside South Africa. After all of that horror, what was truly inspirational was to see Nelson Mandela walk free from jail without bitterness and lead his country to freedom and reconciliation. He said during his visit to New Zealand in 1995 that in his long life, he had learned that it was important to forgive, but never to forget. There is so much wisdom in those words. Our world today faces a cluster of huge challenges. That was so even before the COVID-19 pandemic, which is now driving increased poverty and hunger, more losses of jobs and livelihoods, higher mortality, and higher dropout rates from education. These trends are making it even harder to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. As well, we're battling the climate crisis and its implications for water and food supply, for the health of people, for other natural ecosystems. Biodiversity loss has accelerated. Conflicts are raging in a number of countries, as is serious repression and as is human rights abuses. Almost 80 million people in our world, around 1 in every 97, are forcibly displaced from their homes. If we are to tackle all these crises, our world must recommit to international solidarity and collective action. Many of these challenges are far beyond the capacity of any one country to resolve. The very reason for the formation of the United Nations and many other international bodies was to tackle such trans-border challenges. We need these institutions to work effectively on behalf of all of us in our world, We need many more world leaders with the vision and the foresight shown by Nelson Mandela to step up and to act for a better world. Mandela's work for reconciliation and justice in his own country also resonates with us at this time of great pain in societies where discriminatory treatment is being experienced on the basis of gender, ethnicity, gender orientation, disability, socioeconomic status, and other factors. The death of George Floyd in the United States has again shone a spotlight on such injustice. And clearly, these kinds of challenges exist in many other societies too. Can these societies, like South Africa under Mandela's leadership and ongoing legacy, achieve unity in their diversity? Or will they allow discrimination and disunity to persist? I think there can really only be one choice. We should see Nelson Mandela's words and deeds as a call to action to all of us to work to advance human dignity and fight injustice. If we accept that call, that will be an enduring legacy of the life of this great man who dedicated his whole being to the cause of a better future for all of us. I do encourage the Ubuntu Global Network to continue to accept this call as you are and to keep on making a difference for others. That is what matters. In the end, what is life about? It's about people. It's about people. It's about people.
É sempre sobre pessoas. A mensagem de Ellen Clark e o incentivo a toda a rede Ubuntu Global, a todos os jovens líderes Ubuntu que estão a acompanhar também esta sessão. A responsabilidade sobre cada um dos Ubuntus é grande. A convidada seguinte é Joyce Banda, a primeira mulher presidente do Malawi e a segunda do continente africano a assumir este papel. É empreendedora, ativista, política, filantropa e assume na sua intervenção um compromisso inabalável com a promoção da saúde materna e dos direitos reprodutivos das mulheres. Com esta convicção, criou a Iniciativa Presidencial sobre Saúde Materna e Maternidade Segura, que liderou e que contribuiu fundamentalmente para a promoção da maternidade segura no Malawi. Vamos então escutar as palavras de Joyce Banda.
Today, July 18th, is Mandela Day. And the people all over the world remember this icon, this distinguished son of Africa. For those of us who know Mandela, we will live to remember him for his wisdom and statesmanship, his humanity and sense of humor, as well as his servant leadership style. Tata Madiba believed that all people were created equal before God. The way he conducted himself, he saw no boundaries in this region of SADC, between and among the countries where we live. He championed the freedom of not only South Africans, but all of us Africans. The struggle Tata Madiba led was not only about racial inequality, but a struggle against all forms of oppression against humanity. A struggle for democracy and human dignity. It was a struggle for the emancipation of the youth. It was a struggle for the social security of our children. It was a struggle for the participation of women in politics, in commerce, and in high office. It was a struggle to overcome poverty, and yes, it was a struggle for Africa's freedom. We will remember Tata as a great reformer who championed the cause of humanity, deepened democracy, and dedicated his life to selfless service. A man who worked tirelessly to promote national, regional, at the workplace, and world peace as well. The life of Tata Mandela will continue to inspire all those of us left behind. We all have to strive to emulate President Mandela's stature and spirit so that this legacy should live on. The ideals of political, social, and economical emancipation that he stood for will inspire us forever. Heritage of Nelson Mandela is perhaps more relevant to us in the time of COVID-19 than we could have ever imagined previously. Now more than ever, we must work together as a human family to ensure that all are included in a solution to this terrible challenge to our survival. The scale and the threat of the global COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented. If historically marginalized and vulnerable social groups are left outside the reach of public health efforts, the contagion will find a repository for continued spread, and we will all continue to be threatened. If the specific needs of these groups are not addressed in economic resilience programs, they face impoverishment and even starvation. This requires a specific focus on the most vulnerable and marginalized in our response. It is imperative that we ensure an inclusive public health response in which public information, testing and contact tracing, medical care, eventual treatments and vaccines are offered and distributed equitably. The Club de Madrid is proposing and supporting interventions to ensure social inclusion in the public health response coherent with the Agenda 2030 Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, and particularly indicator 3.D, strengthen the capacity of all countries, in particular developing countries, for early warning, risk reduction, and management of national and global health risks. These are still the foundations for the ongoing and future crises, and we must commit to fulfilling that we must commit to fulfilling. We also must focus on the largest excluded social group of all, women and girls. Many of you may be aware of my lifelong commitment to ensure that those most excluded, particularly women and children, are not left behind. Goal 5 specifically works to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls, and our pandemic response strategies must ensure a focus on the differential impact on women and girls in terms of public health and economic to be successful. My fellow Africans and all the people all over the world, as you know, in Africa, borders rarely follow the identities of social groups. This presents challenges for governing even in the best of times, given diverse languages and cultural perspectives which need to be addressed. So it is important that we collaborate and build upon our shared strengths through connections across boundary lines. Government leaders and governments must work together nationally, but also across borders and at regional levels to attend to this diversity effectively. Nelson Mandela, who taught us the value of unity and reconciliation, would expect no less of us today.
As palavras sábias da Presidente Joyce Banda, ex-Presidente do Malawi, aqui uma voz com raiz africana a trazer-nos também razões para celebrar este Dia Internacional Nelson Mandela. Mudamos de continente para um país, uma região, que sempre teve grandes desafios no que diz respeito à construção de pontes. Temos agora, a partir da Bósnia, a participação de Mladen Ivanic. Foi primeiro-ministro da República Srpska em 2003. Mais tarde, após as eleições gerais na Bósnia-Herzegovina, em 2014, foi nomeado chairman da presidência da Bósnia-Herzegovina, cargo que exerceu até 2018. Vamos ouvir as suas palavras neste Dia Internacional Nelson Mandela.
Nelson Mandela was a very specific political personality in the modern world. He was somebody who was so committed to the basic values and who was ready to suffer in order to defend these basic values in which he believed. These values were that all the human beings are the same, that the people have to live and can live in harmony, and that all human beings are equal. It looks like a very normal values, but society in which he lived was not able to accept these values at that moment. And because of that, Mr. Mandela suffered very much. But he was always committed to these basic values. And this is an example which is very rare in the modern world. It's very difficult to find examples like this in a current modern world, and especially among the current leaders. Populism, the fact that the most important issues for the current leaders is to stay in the power and not to stay with the basic values. That's the big difference. And because of that, we cannot forget what Mr. Mandela did. And we have to continue to support these basic values as much as we can, but all, not just a single cases of that, but all of us have to follow his basic values. And I am quite sure that his role in the modern world will be remembered. And it will stay like a very clear example that you can succeed. Mr. Mandela left behind him all these values, and I think that this is the biggest legacy of him, and hope that this will be example for the new generation of the leadership.
O eco do legado de Mandela, a partir dos Balcãs, as palavras de Mladen Ivanic, trazendo para a sua realidade concreta os desafios de construção de pontes. Vamos agora até um pouco mais a norte, vamos para a zona norte da Europa, concretamente para a Finlândia, onde contamos com a presença de uma das mais prestigiadas figuras políticas do mundo, Tarja Halonen. Foi presidente do país entre 2000 e 2012, assumiu antes várias outras funções no governo, trabalha atualmente em estreita colaboração com a ONU, nomeadamente sobre democracia, desenvolvimento sustentável e justiça social. As palavras de Tarja Halonen para esta Conferência Internacional Pontes Mandela.
Dear José, Ramos, Horta and other friends, fantastic to have a contact even in this time of a pandemic. Because Nelson Mandela's personality was exceptional. His legacy continues to inspire us and guide us in our aspiration towards more peaceful, fair, and equal world. When the basic principles of democracy, rule of law, and human rights are being questioned, and when some people and some politicians wish to turn inwards and be more protective of their own self-interests, Mandela's vision is becoming even more important. His vision did not concern just one nation, but the whole world. His example encourages to understand the importance of cooperation and solidarity. The Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted 5 years ago are based on an idea of global partnership. These goals form a holistic framework that guide the work of the global community as a whole. This means every one of us to a more peaceful and prosperous world. The SDGs are based on an idea that most pressing problems, including climate change, inequality, or pandemics, cannot be solved by individual people or countries alone. The COVID-19 pandemic has perhaps opened the eyes of many people to see the big, strong nations or great military powers have not fared well in the fight against this pandemic. High levels of military spending have not guaranteed protection of health. Money alone cannot buy security. Equality is at least as important. It builds basic confidence and trust in the society, which is needed especially in hard times. When people trust their leaders and institutions, they are more willing to follow the necessary regulations. But for this, of course, we need also wise leaders. We also need cooperation and solidarity. There has been multilateral cooperation in funding research and development for an effective and safe vaccine against COVID-19. But cooperation and solidarity is needed to make the vaccine available for all people in all countries free of charge. This is in the interest of the whole world. COVID-19 can also teach us many lessons. Experiences from this pandemic could be useful for mitigation of climate change if we want to. Dear friends, so I think that the most powerful key to empower people is still education. A just world means respect for human rights, and this encompasses health, education, and social security. Mandela held a profound understanding that to create a stable and prosperous society, all its members must be able to have ownership of it. When people have a feeling of being equal, also the society as a whole is better off. Education is not only a human right, but also increases the possibility of breaking deprivation and exclusion cycles, and therefore advancing equality. This requires access to quality education without discrimination. It also requires investment in lifelong education and training, as well as on gender equality. We need women and girls in science, technology, engineering, and math, and we need men and boys in caring professions too. We cannot lose human potential to pointless gender stereotypes. This has always been true, but today, in the time of the rapid changes, global challenges, and need of strong international cooperation in trade and science, education is ever more needed. Dear Jose, dear friends, undemocratic society can easily be a breeding ground for violence. Violence and conflict hinder us from achieving needed reforms, including the Sustainable Development Goals. Violence has cross-generational deteriorating effects on society and social behavior. As Mandela said, peace is the most powerful weapon that any community or nation can have for development. Conflicts are more complicated than ever before and need more inclusive solutions. Women's participation in peace negotiations increases the sustainability and also the quality of peace. But still, women continue to be largely excluded from peace processes. That's a pity. Global economic inequality is another concern. Many people are angry and bitter, and for a good reason. We, as the global community, have reached many dreams, but economically, the world is less and less equal. And we know there is no silver bullet. Solution can only be found in solidarity and cooperation. It is important to rebuild international cooperation networks, defend United Nations and other multilateral collaboration, and build trust among people within and better nations. Dear friends, truth and reconciliation, listening and being heard, and restoring the dignity of the people were key elements in South Africa's transformation to a democracy. It is still a method that works, and the objective of the reconciliation process resonates today. Overcoming past atrocities and oppression in our societies, whether it is colonialism, racism, or other forms of discrimination, needs honest and truthful dialogue and understanding how the present continues to be also shaped by the past. Truth can be painful, but it is necessary. And to conclude, in his Nobel Peace Prize lecture, Mandela referred to the global anti-apartheid movement as people who recognize that an injury to one is an injury to all. While apartheid is history, racism and discrimination continue to break our societies. It is our common duty to uproot them. We are equal and we are valuable, and we have a shared responsibility. Let's work together, then we are strong. Thank you for your attention.
Vamos continuar a trabalhar juntos. O apelo da Presidente Tarja Halonen da Finlândia, que se junta a nós também nesta conferência internacional que une participantes de 53 países. Vamos continuar a reforçar e a dar atenção ao papel das mulheres, nomeadamente na liderança política em diferentes países do mundo, e vamos de novo até África. Amena Gurib-Fakim foi a primeira mulher eleita presidente nas Maurícias. Atualmente continua com intervenção no domínio da política e também tem o seu interesse científico na área da biodiversidade. Vamos então ouvir Amena Gurib-Fakim.
During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination and have fought against Black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. These were the words of Nelson Mandela in 1963 during the Rivonia trial that would lead to his incarceration on Robben Island. What he said then on harmony, equal opportunities as ideals for which he lived for and for which he would be prepared to die are ideals that still resonate today. Nelson Mandela was not just an idealist, but a visionary and a pragmatist. His life is the message for all of us on this continent of ours and for the wider world. This troubled world of ours need more of the likes of our Madiba. On this Nelson Mandela Day, let us celebrate his memory and what his vision still means for all of us. Thank you.
Amena Gurib-Fakim, a ex-presidente das Maurícias, mais uma voz a sublinhar a importância do legado de Mandela para que, no presente, possamos dar vida aos valores que movimentaram a vida deste líder extraordinário. E terminamos este painel, regressando agora à Europa, de novo à Bósnia. A Bósnia, como sublinhámos, temos grandes desafios de construção de pontes e temos connosco Zlato Lagundiza. Zlato Lagundiza served in Bosnia and Herzegovina government as a prime minister and interim prime minister. He took on the other roles in the Bosnian government. He was elected to the Bosnia and Herzegovina parliament 6 times from 1996 to 2010. Mr. Zlatko Lagundiza, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, it was really an honor and privilege to be with you today. And I mean, on the end of the panel, when you speak, you have very, very problematic and challenging issues in front of you. I mean, a lot of thoughts that I was planning to say and thinking that would be proper. I mean, I already heard. So I will just reflect a little bit on what I heard so far and just say a few words about something that we in Club de Madrid are very proud of, which is one of our pillars projects called Shared Society. Shared Society, the project that is more than 15 years old, a project that was in the very beginning presented to Nelson Mandela himself. Of course, I'm calling you from Sarajevo, and since it was already mentioned in different contexts, wise words of Pope Francis, I just want to tell you that I'm talking to you directly from Sarajevo, as Pope Francis called us European Jerusalem, the city where for centuries people of different ethnicities and religions lived in harmony. Of course, we had some periods in which we're not the role model of harmony, but that's something that is making me more sure that the shared society that Nelson Mandela was with us when we launched it, and that concept is something that is not only future for my country, but a future of the rest of the world. At the time when we launched the Shared Society project, we're thinking about Palestine and Israel, about former Yugoslavia and Bosnia in particular, and we were a little bit talking about how good examples were in Northern Ireland, the things were sorted out. And of course, we had Nelson Mandela and the example of South Africa as how the people, after such a segregation, long-living segregation, how they can evolve thanks to the leadership of people like Nelson Mandela, and thanks to the will of the people who were ready to follow that path, who were ready to be with him, how it is possible to overcome and start living in something which is called shared society and harmonious society. So advancing towards shared society is a formidable endeavor in the best of times. But in the current sanitary and economic storm, it becomes a titanic effort to go in that direction. That will require relentless commitment of young leaders, like leaders that we are having here from Ubuntu Group. And I want to really congratulate you, young people who are following the footsteps of Nelson Mandela and from his legacy, learning about how to build up the future. There will be more future that is going to be future of shared society future, not segregated societies future like we are challenging today. Now, what I want to say is that today, since we live in this COVID time, we all know that deadly toll is most of the world is still rising, and flattening the curve, the deceased people number is prime task for every nation and for all of us together. But I want to point out that there are 4 curves that we have to keep flattening. If we can put it somehow, scale it down. If we want to avoid potential, what I call 4E tsunami, which is epidemic curve that we want to flatten, or health curve, then economic curve, that economic disaster is on the horizon. Of course, education, Princess Ria was talking very much about it. Now she's not the only one, she was talking about it. And the fourth curve is an environmental curve or climate change curve that we are witnessing today and that we have to open the flattening up. So I think that our future is heavily jeopardized, as well as our economy, not only by our health, but our economy, our educational system, and environmental degradation. So I would, Raman, I would add to your Marshall Plan, if we can talk about 4E Marshall Plans. Marshall Plan for our health, or our epidemic Marshall Plan. The Yunus vaccine, discussion about vaccine is part of that. So we can call about epidemic Marshall Plan. We can talk about economic Marshall Plan. We can talk about need for educational Marshall Plan and environmental Marshall Plan. These four challenges are global challenges, and they cannot be sorted out locally. They have to be fight and be fought on locally, but they have to be also tackled globally. So my suggestion for your young Ubuntu leaders, I would like to ask you, I will just conclude with what I learned from Mandela. I was talking with a lot of young people in the last few years about how the great people like Mandela, how they actually managed to lead the people in such a turbulent time. And I ask you, I will give you 5 words, 5 key words that I think what I learned from discussion with people like we have today in our screens together, physically distant, but socially very close. I think that Mandela leadership is defined by 5 key words, and I'm offering you those 5 key words, and I'm asking you to think about what are your key 5 words, key words about a leadership that is needed for tomorrow. So 5 words that I'm offering you based on what I learned from Mandela and people like him is, first one is picture, or people can say vision. First keyword is picture. You have to see the future that you are going for, that you're ready to go for, be part of, and be part of the people who are going to chase that future. Why I say picture is because it's like in Martin Luther King's speech, I have a dream. When you have a dream, you see something. You see the promised land behind the hill of the troubles. So the first vision requires seeing the future that you're ready to go for. You call it picture, you call it vision. Second one is principles. You have to be driven by principles or a set of values that are embodied in what we call shared society approach. Shared society where differences are our asset, not our liability. So the third one, it's something which is all Mandela life and people like him, from Gandhi to Martin Luther, they were never giving up. So persistence. Persistence is the third key word. So I think that picture, principles, persistence are 3 key words that have to be followed by something which we could call passion. Be passionate about what you believe in. Be passionate about what you are going for. Be passionate about your visions, your pictures, your dreams, making alive. And 5 is 5th P, Mandela 5 Ps. P is about people. P is about people, about us. It's partnering all of us. If we are living in a world in which we actually have to make alliance of like-minded people, like-minded entities, global alliance of people who are in some organizations as well, global alliance of like-minded entities, people, medias, NGOs, academics, and finally, the governments and international multilateral organizations who are like-minded about our future that reflects from what Mandela taught us with his life and through his life. So I'm calling you to have your, my dear young colleagues, 5, 3, 6, 4, 1, 2 keywords about leadership. Leadership that you will be following in your path to creating a better world. New normal in post-COVID time, because new normal has to be not normal like the normal used to be, because what we used to have was not normal in every sense of that meaning. So new normal that will be better than the old one. And that's why we require people like you, young people who are inspired by Mandela's, like we used to be, like we still are. So good luck, bon voyage, and 5 your 2, 3, 4, 5 keywords about leadership of tomorrow, be inspired by Mandela life. Then we can go forward to actually have better world for your generation than the world that we lived in. Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting us. Thank you for being able to listen all those great thoughts that I shared with you and you shared, and we shared with all hundreds and hundreds of people all over the world. So find your keywords for leadership of Mandela style and live along that path.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zlato Lagundiza, for your inspiring words in this conference. E terminamos agora, desta forma, este painel extraordinário com grandes líderes mundiais que nos trouxeram a sua reflexão sobre o legado de Mandela e os grandes desafios contemporâneos. Mas este encontro também